Group 4 project. Aim. Our aims are to learn how climate change impacts the bushfires and how the bushfires impacts Australia, and to learn how to analyze data found by other people.
Climate change has a huge impact on the world today and has become one of the main topics of debates within the last decade, where we as the youth have started to think about our impact on the world and the possible consequences it brings. That brings us to our interest in Goal 13, which is climate action in UN's Sustainable Development Goals. Climate change has both a direct and an indirect impact on natural disasters, and in the beginning of the year 2020, we heard of the horrible bushfires in Australia, which brings us to our interest and our research question.
And our research question is, how does climate change affect the bushfires in Southeast Australia, and what are the effects on the country?
The average temperature in Australia has increased by 0.9 degrees since 1910, while the minimum temperature in Australia has increased by 1.2 degrees. According to scientists Dunlop and Brown, the average temperature in Australia is estimated to rise somewhere between 0.2 and 2.2 degrees annually as a result of climate change. There have been an increase of hot and dry years in Australia. These drier conditions are likely to have affected fire weather in Australia. Fire weather is measured by different factors like temperature and wind speed. There have been recorded longer fire seasons every year, and this is caused by the droughts and higher temperatures. Global warming has pushed up the odds of such extreme fire events occurring in southeastern Australia by at least 30%, according to a new study. The rainfall patterns have changed in Australia due to the increase in temperature. Rainfall in the eastern part of Australia decreases with 20 millimeters per decade. According to SOPAIA, the southern part of Australia is more likely to be dry in the future, which will result in drier land and more droughts. Large areas of land in southeast Australia have been subject to a 3-year-long drought, and combined with the rise in temperature, enlarges the risk of bushfires.
3 billion of animals died in Australia because of bushfires past year. Experts say 143 million mammals, 180 million birds, 51 million frogs, and 2.5 billion reptiles have been affected by the fires. After the animals were dead, it also affected the major trees. It affected all population and also environment, and also affected the vegetation. The animals which they live in the forest, such as iguanas, snakes, they need some food. They should do the food chain, for example, insects and bug, etc. For the population who lives in their 5,900 buildings were already burned in 2019 to 2020. In 2020, 34 people died in a bushfire.
The agriculture in Australia gets affected every year by both the climate changing and the bushfires. The agriculture will always be dependent on the climate to some extent, and with the increased temperature resulting in more droughts and the droughts being longer, the agriculture needing water can be greatly challenged. With the droughts being longer, the chance of bushfires are also largely increased, and the bushfires have a huge impact on the agriculture in Australia. Every year, the bushfires in Australia scorch the pastures, destroying the crops, livestock, and vineyards. In the states New South Wales and Victoria in South Australia, the dairy production is the main focus of the bushfires. Since New South Wales and Victoria combined has 75.4% of all of Australia's dairy production, making them Australia's key dairy production states. The dairy production is harmed when the farmland is lost to the fires, among with the dairy cows on the farmland. Also, the infrastructure related to the dairy production has been harmed, limiting the dairy production till the infrastructure has been restored once again. Meat, wool, and honey production is also harmed for the same ways as the dairy production is.
Is Australia taking action against climate change? Officially, yes. Australia took part in the Paris Climate Agreement, and they set their target as reducing gas emissions by 26 to 28% compared to 2005. However, this was met with great criticism as their goals were considered too low, and now in 2020 they're still not on track for meeting those goals. As of now, they're estimated to lower gas emissions by 16% which fulfills the Kyoto Protocol, signed in 2005, but not the Paris Agreement. Australia is, as of now, or when the article, the information came from was written, which was in late 2019, the last out of 57 countries responsible for more than 90% of greenhouse emissions. They're one of the largest exporters of coal, iron ore, uranium, and natural gas, surpassing both Russia and the USA in coal exports. The current government, the Liberal Party, have also been accused of refusing to act against climate change. This is both due to the previous points, but Australia was not present in a UN climate summit in September, and they have withdrawn from an international fund against climate change. Scott Morrison, the current Prime Minister, has made statements such as, "We're aiming for a vibrant and viable economy, as well as a vibrant and sustainable environment, and our climate policy settings are to meet and beat emission reduction targets." However, he has not shown interest in taking major action against climate change, and his party has in the past categorized climate change as a metropolitan fad for urban professionals. Australia does have a climate plan, though, the Emission Reduction Fund. In 2019, they put forth $2 billion Australian dollars to help farmers and businesses reduce emissions over the next 15 years, which makes the total investment 4.5 billion Australian dollars. Unfortunately, they have failed to show how the ERF and other organizations can be scaled up to reach the goals set in the Paris Agreement.
Our way of finding our information is that we have used Google to find information within the topic of Australian bushfires research, bushfires impacts on Australia, and climate change and bushfires. When selecting our sources, we have mainly searched for and used government websites, reliable sources, and research reports. Within some of the sites we have found there has been sittings to another site that we also have used.
Data collection and analysis. Here's a picture of two drawings of Australia. The one on the left is observed temperature change, so the change in temperature over a period of time. The picture shows that the temperature has increased by approximately 1 degree. And on the right, there's a prediction of temperature change in Australia in the 21st century, where it's seen that the temperature is expected to rise around 5 degrees.
And here we have the data collection from Dairy Australia, which is the dairy production that we used, the data. And we used the May 20 data, which is the most recent ones. And here we can see that New South Wales and Victoria combined has 75.4% of the national dairy production. And that's the data that we used.
And if we're going to talk about our discussion part, our weaknesses was secondary data and time limit, and our strengths are government reports and scientific reports.
Okay, summing up on this whole Group 4 project, then moving back to our research question with how does climate change affect the bushfires in Southeast Australia, and what are the effects on the country? We can now conclude that there are huge effects both on the climate change, on the bushfires, but also from the bushfires on Australia.
The increase in temperature in Australia caused by climate change is causing droughts and a drier landscape, which is more prone to bushfires.
In general, bushfire affected the environment, also animal. The huge effect was on ecosystem and leaving animals homeless and without food.
And the bushfires, destruction on the farmlands and the infrastructure have a huge impact on the dairy production, crops, and livestock.
And unfortunately, the government is not doing much to fight climate change despite their responsibility.
And that was it for our Group 4 project, and here we have our sources.